Is college football dying?
No, but the old version is absolutely on life support.
That's the whole episode right there.
Pretty much. Roll credits. Everybody go home. Save electricity.
Seriously, though, because people keep saying the portal killed college football or NIL killed college football or players getting paid ruined the sport. And every time I hear that, I think, no. What actually happened is the business model got dragged into the light.
Exactly. The sport didn't suddenly become greedy in 2026. It was already expensive. It was already political. It was already legalistic, and it was already full of intermediaries and already running on subsidies in more places than fans want to admit. What changed is the veil ripped. Now everybody gets to see the machinery grinding.
And it is grinding because now you got a 2-week transfer portal frenzy.
Yep.
You got NIL money flowing through collectives, agencies, and side entities. You got the House settlement era changing how schools think about direct compensation. You got state attorneys general, courts, and the FTC creeping closer to the action. And then you've got athletic departments that, in a whole lot of cases, were not exactly floating on piles of extra cash to begin with.
Right. So the question is not, is college football ruined? The question is, what exactly is this thing becoming? Because the answer is not amateur sports. The answer is not fully professional sports. The answer is some strange laboratory created creature where labor law, antitrust, private association governance, donor economics, and institutional vanity all get trapped in one trench coat.
And we're going to talk about all of it today. The legal shift, the financial shock, Trinidad Chambliss, and what his case really tells us, agent fraud, tampering, schools running into the red, and whether the future is reform, contraction, or full-blown breakaway football oligarchy.
And one important thing up top, based on the news and the court cases we've been synthesizing, I think it's important to remember that Trinidad Chambliss matter is presented as an eligibility dispute, not a documented fraud prosecution. The distinction matters because around this topic, the internet loves to throw gasoline first, in fact, second, and I've seen that happen a little bit here. There's no allegations of fraud with Trinidad. It is an eligibility dispute.
And with that, welcome to the show. This is going to be fun, cheerful, and only lightly apocalyptic.
I like lightly apocalyptic. You're listening to the AAA Ball and Play podcast. Quick note, this is for education and entertainment. Nothing here is legal, tax, or financial advice, and nothing we say creates an athlete-agent relationship. Listening or contacting us does not make us your lawyers or your agents. For advice, talk to a qualified professional in your state.
Let's start with the big historical frame because this matters. People act like the chaos arrived out of nowhere. It didn't. This has been a sequence.
Yes, the timeline matters, though, because the NCAA didn't wake up one morning and accidentally become a quasi-regulator of an emerging labor market. This was a chain reaction.
All right, Lee, walk me through it.
All right. So step one, we had the one-time transfer exception. That was a major symbolic and practical shift because it normalized mobility, not infinite mobility, not consequence-free mobility, but much more athlete movement with immediate eligibility. Once that happened, the old assumption that schools more or less controlled athlete location through restrictive transfer consequences, that started cracking.
Then NIL.
Yes, then NIL. The interim NIL policy in 2021 was basically the NCAA saying we are no longer standing in front of this truck. That didn't create a clean national system. It created patchwork. State law mattered, school policy mattered, collective behavior mattered, intermediaries multiplied. So instead of one unified command system, you got 50 experiments in regulated chaos.
Which is one of my favorite forms of chaos, by the way. Terrible for governance, great for content.
It was phenomenal for content, but it is horrible for coherent compliance.
And then the NCAA keeps tinkering with transfer windows.
Yes, because window engineering becomes one of the only levers, whichever way you want to say it still feels comfortable pulling. If you cannot safely impose broad compensation restraints without getting body slammed by antitrust problems, and if your NIL enforcement position is getting challenged by attorneys, attorney generals, and courts, then timing rules start to look attractive. You tell yourself, we can't fully stop behavior, but maybe we can confine that behavior.
Like trying to organize a tornado with office hours.
Yes, exactly. Very optimistic, very bureaucratic, very please respect the signage while the building is on fire.
And the House settlement framework matters here too, because now we're not just talking about third-party NIL weirdness floating outside the building. We're talking about direct compensation pressure becoming part of actual institutional planning.
And that's the huge part. Once direct athlete compensation starts becoming a serious internal budgeting issue, which is one of the things I'm very concerned about, the legal questions and the financial questions fuse together. Before, schools could still pretend some of this was out there in collective land. Now, the books, the ledgers, the reporting categories, the audit posture, all of that starts changing. So what I basically argue in the paper, the blog, is this. The center of gravity has moved from old NCAA prohibition towards a hybrid system of NCAA process rules, private litigation, government enforcement, and institutional reporting.
Which means the old cliche, the NCAA is in charge, is just not really true in the old sense anymore.
Not in the old sense, no. The NCAA is still influential, but their power has been fragmented. Courts matter, state officials matter, conferences matter. The FTC matters more than a lot of sports fans probably realize when you're talking about agent conduct. Schools matter, donors matter, collectives, data systems. It's like a hydra. It's a many-headed beast now.
So when fans say, why doesn't the NCAA just stop all this? The answer is because legally and operationally, that's not how this ecosystem works anymore.
That's right. And I'm not sure we really want the NCAA to have that much power again. And that's why a lot of what we're seeing looks so incredibly awkward. This is a regulator, the NCAA, trying to preserve competitive order in an environment where its traditional authority is legally narrowed and its practical reach is full of holes. So it's going to lean on process, windows, disclosures, transaction review, eligibility procedures, audit tools. The vibe is less command and control and more forensic accounting with shoulder pads.
Now that line needs to be on a t-shirt.
I would wear it to oral argument.
And I think this is the first intellectual mistake people make. They frame the problem morally. Yeah. This is greedy. This is disloyal. This isn't the game I grew up with, instead of institutionally.
Exactly. And morality is part of the public conversation, but institutionally, the issue is simpler. The compensation and mobility realities changed faster than the governance architecture. That mismatch is what we're watching cause all the chaos right now.
So the sport didn't suddenly lose its soul. It lost a shelter that kept everyone from admitting what the business actually was.
Well, that's the clean version, right?
Right.
The sport used to hide labor constraints inside romance. Now the romance is still there, marching bands, rivalry week, campus ritual, all the glorious nonsense, but the labor and money questions are no longer hiding behind these things.
And once that happens, every old rule starts looking less like tradition and more like a restraint that somebody's lawyer wants to test out in court.
Bingo. And that takes us straight into Trinidad Chambliss, because his story, at least from what I'm talking about in the paper, it's not gotcha scandal. It's actually something that is much more interesting and more revealing.
Let's say this carefully, because the internet chatter around these things gets sloppy, and it does so in a hurry. Based on your research, Lee, into the court documents, Trinidad Chambliss is not being presented here as some proven NIL fraud example.
Correct. And like I said in the intro, that matters. Trinidad's public record footprint as of early March 2026 is primarily an eligibility waiver dispute. The reporting cited says he sought another year, as we all know, right? He sought another year, was denied. He pursued relief in the Mississippi state courts.
So why is he central to this discussion?
Well, because his case illustrates something bigger than his individual facts. In the NIL era, eligibility is not just a participation privilege. It is economically valuable. It's kind of a gateway asset. If you can play, you can earn. If you can't play, you may lose current value, future transfer value, exposure value, and leverage.
So the dispute is not just let me play ball. It's your decision affects a real economic opportunity.
Yes. And so the sharp framing here is this. Eligibility starts to look property-like, not property in the simplistic first-year law student sense where we put a bow on it and call it fee simple football. I love that, fee simple football. But property-like in the sense that access has monetizable consequences. A waiver denial can act like a delicensing event.
Now that is a fascinating concept because it changes the emotional tone of these cases. Under the older mythology, an eligibility decision looked like the NCAA deciding who gets one more turn in the schoolyard. And in the current world, it can look more like an institution making a decision that affects market access.
Yes. And once a decision affects market access, litigation incentives go up, due process arguments get hotter, fairness arguments get sharper, administrative record quality matters more, internal inconsistencies matter more. If the record keeping is messy, that mess is no longer just embarrassing to a school, it becomes dangerous.
Which is why you keep saying waiver processes need to be litigation ready.
Yes, because when courts are already skeptical of NCAA-style restrictions in adjacent contexts, any sloppy waiver process becomes a legal invitation. If you're going to deny something with meaningful economic consequences in this country, you'd better have a coherent, documented, defensible reason.
And let's deal with the other thing that you've noted and we're careful about. The gaps in knowledge. You don't pretend to have every filing, every order, every investigative document.
Right. And that restraint is important. There's no reliable basis, and I'm going to say this again, right? There's no reliable basis in the materials I have to say, here is some hidden fraud matter involving Chambliss. And I'm actually, quite honestly, tired of hearing people say that, right? Everything I have read, all of the retrieved sources, and I have quite a few, well, none of them explicitly say, none of those documents surfaced a primary NCAA enforcement notice against him. There just isn't one. Nor did I uncover a DOJ, Department of Justice, or state charging document tied to him. There aren't any that as a lawyer I can find. So, which means there probably aren't any, right? That does not prove the universe is empty. It just means the accessible records do not support sensationalistic claims.
Which ironically makes the story better.
I think it makes it much better because the real story is structural. Chambliss becomes a lens for a bigger issue. College football now has eligibility decisions with legal and economic weight that look a lot less like private club housekeeping and a lot more like decisions with genuine market consequences.
And once that's true, the NCAA's old trust us. Yeah. We're preserving competitive balance. Tone starts sounding a little thinner.
It does, especially because the surrounding environment is already unstable. If athletes can monetize, if transfers can reset leverage, if compensation structures are evolving, then denying someone access is no longer just symbolic. It's economically meaningful, and courts are going to notice, and they have been noticing, meaningful things.
And for viewers, here's the practical translation. The Trinidad Chambliss issue was not just one quarterback wants one more year. It is a preview of how eligibility disputes may increasingly function as business disputes wearing shoulder pads.
That's beautifully put. The football part is the football part is visible. The legal architecture underneath it is where the real future battle lives.
And the future battle gets even messier once we go from one athlete's eligibility to the actual books. Because now we need to talk about the thing fan bases hate hearing. A lot of these departments are not flush with magical portal cash.
Nope. Some of them are rich. Some of them are famous. Some of them are subsidized. Some of them are all three. But those are not the same thing.
This is the part where people get mad because they hear college football money and assume every program is swimming in gold coins like Scrooge McDuck and shoulder pads.
I love that visual. Yes. And I am basically saying, slow down, Captain Spreadsheet. The headline money at the top of the sport is real, but a lot of departments are only healthy, quote unquote healthy, if you count institutional support, student fees, or accounting transfers as athletic revenue.
Which is the kind of detail that can ruin Thanksgiving if you say it too early around alumni.
It really can, because people confuse brand visibility with financial self-sufficiency, and those are not synonyms.
Let's walk through some of the sample programs that you use in your blog and paper.
Sure. In the legal and financial section comparison table, like I said, this is far more scholarly paper than a blog, which I have that section up on the screen right now with us. LSU is around $220.3 million in operating revenues, and then had $218.5 million in operating expenses for fiscal year 2024, so barely positive. Now, a quick note in here: when schools, for the most part, everybody can choose their own accounting system, accounting year, but most schools, when it says fiscal year 2024, it will be the fall and spring semester 2024. And then spring 2025. That's usually how that goes. So anyway, they were just barely positive. Washington is around $190.9 million in revenue and $200.1 million in expense. So negative. Oregon is positive, but not by some laughably gigantic margin once total overhead is included. Ole Miss shows a deficit. Kansas shows a deficit. Utah shows a larger deficit in that fiscal year 2024 comparison. Colorado State and New Mexico show slight positives, but those numbers sit in systems where subsidy dependence and fragility matter. Louisiana Tech is structurally negative.
And the key phrase here is basically, the arms race eats the margin.
Yep, that's the monster under the bed, and everybody knows those are real. So even where football revenue is substantial, expenses, notice a lot of those schools that I just mentioned were championship schools.
Yep.
So is substantial expenses. You've got substantial expenses not related to specific teams, facility cost, administrative overhead, debt service, recruiting infrastructure, which is huge, right? And now compensation adjacent cost can burn through what looks like a huge top line.
So when fans say this school makes $100 million, why are they crying poor?
Yep.
The answer is not necessarily that they're lying. The answer may be that the system is expensive in ways that most fans never see.
That is absolutely correct. And the MFRS lens matters here because it standardizes categories enough to show the bones, if you will. You can actually see things like student fees, direct institutional support, indirect support, and broad non-team expense categories. That's why my paper leans, and like the newspapers and all the other reporting too, leans on the MFRS as the ground truth baseline, even while acknowledging limitations.
Tammy Lee, for the sake of the people listening in, what does MFRS stand for, and what is it?
Well, I could do a whole long thing on this, but quickly, as quick as possible by still explaining it fully. MFRS stands for Membership Financial Reporting System. It is the NCAA's standardized annual financial reporting system for member schools' athletic departments. It's used as a baseline framework for comparing athletic department revenues, expenses, subsidies, and then all the newer related compensation categories. So in plain English, it's the bookkeeping framework schools use to report athletics money in a common format. And it includes things like ticket sales, student fees, direct, indirect institutional support, media rights, operating expenses, and non-team overhead. And I know I'm trying to keep it short, but we've got to keep leaning on the MFRS. I'm so bad at acronyms. MFRS, because this helps show how some programs only look healthy after subsidies and support flows are counted, and that a big name program can still end up near break even or negative once full overhead is included. So the clean short version is this: MFRS equals the NCAA Standard Athletic Financial Reporting System.
Okay.
So,
how about that? Now, you mentioned limitations, and so I'm going to ask you about that and let me know if I'm right or wrong. One of the most important limitations is that the fiscal year 2026 actual MFRS results aren't fully out. Is that correct?
Yes. And so again, remember, fiscal year 2026 is going to be the 2025-2026 school year.
Okay.
That's why they can't be out yet. So, and that's a huge caveat. The fiscal year 2026 financial shock paper, right, which is part of my blog, if you will, has modeled estimates. It's not pretending to give you an audited final truth because we don't have those numbers yet. But I straight out say, and so do a lot of other people, that you can't. These are estimates, right? But even schools are starting to report their numbers after the football season ended, and they are very shocking. So,
which is exactly how serious people should talk about this. Not, I have the final secret truth, but here is the best structured estimate based on the data that we have.
Right. That humility is not weakness. It is method. I mean, this is, at the end of the day, this is accounting, and that's not, you got to have numbers, right? So the gremlin here is false precision, and we don't want false precision.
Now, let's talk about the driver snapshot because that part is revealing.
Yes, it is. I looked at ticket sales, contributions, media rights to explain why some programs can absorb volatility better than others. So, for example, LSU has much bigger ticket, contribution, and media right numbers than places like Louisiana Tech, Washington, Oregon, Ole Miss, Kansas, and Utah. They all have more. I just made that a terrible run-on sentence.
Did you?
I did. So what I'm saying is LSU has much bigger ticket contribution and media right numbers than places like Louisiana Tech, period, right?
Okay.
Washington, Oregon, Ole Miss, Kansas, and Utah, they all have more substantial contribution and media bases than Group of Five or lower revenue programs. That doesn't make them invincible. It just means they have thicker shock absorbers.
And that's such an important distinction. Bigger doesn't mean safe. Bigger means you might survive the collision a little better.
Right. Think of it like this. Some programs are driving luxury SUVs towards the cliff. Some are driving compact sedans, but they're still driving towards the cliff. The cliff still matters.
And some are on a bicycle
Yes.
with one loose wheel and a donor in the basket.
Yep. That is Louisiana Tech catching a stray, but not an unfair one.
Now, give the people the sharpest version of the deficit point.
Okay, here it is. College football's visible glamour hides a lot of institutional dependency. Some departments are net positive only after support flows are counted. Some high revenue brands are barely positive after full overhead. Some mid-tier and smaller programs are persistently fragile. So when direct compensation pressure and portal volatility intensify, these programs are not all starting from the same floor.
And that's why just pay the players is morally compelling, but operationally incomplete as a sentence.
Yes, athletes should not be asked to subsidize a broken mythology. And that's like key, right? But that does not mean every program has a painless way to absorb every new cost. And some of these costs are ridiculous. But the legal answer and the financial answer need to talk to each other like adults in the same room.
Which, as we know, is rare in college sports. Usually one room is screaming fairness and the other room is screaming budget model,
Yes.
and both are ignoring the plumbing.
And the plumbing is undefeated.
And now we get to the moment where the plumbing bursts, January 2026.
Yes. And and those numbers are part of what precipitated the impetus for writing what I did here. So
Quick pause here. If you're enjoying this episode, subscribe right now because this is the kind of conversation we do on purpose, not hot take confetti, real law, real money, and real sports.
And if you've ever yelled at your screen about NIL, the portal, or what happened to college football, this is the episode to send your group chat. Your uncle, your alumni friend, or that one person who thinks every roster move is just vibes.
Now, let's get to the portal window because this is where the fiscal shock gets very real, very fast, very ugly.
Yes.
Now, this part is astonishing. Your framing is basically the portal didn't just create movement. The compressed timing changed the financial risk profile.
Exactly. And that's the important insight. The problem is not merely players can transfer. The problem is that January 2026 compressed the key football shopping period into roughly 2 weeks and removed the spring window, which was needed, right? But that was front-loaded chaos. That means retention packages, transfer acquisition cost, legal review, compliance review, travel, visit logistics, all of it bunched up at once, all of those costs.
So instead of year-round weirdness, you get concentrated weirdness.
Yes, highly concentrated weirdness, which had highly concentrated financial implications. So the blog/paper identifies several channels, right? One was price compression. If you have fewer days to recruit or retain a player, the market can become overpay or lose him. 2, you had front-loaded cash needs. You need money ready in January, not in some abstract future budget quarter. And 3, you have got extra support staff and travel intensity because you have this one person, like before, could have done this over a month. Now one person can't do it over 2 weeks, so you have to bring in another person, right? That was very simplistic. But and then 4, legal and compliance exposure because rushed contracting breeds disputes, and then 5, enforcement tail risk because the NCAA is also threatening significant penalties for any attempt to circumvent the process.
And that last part really matters. We're not just talking about risk in the general poetic sense.
Right.
We're talking about penalties tied to the football budget.
Correct. The blog notes reporting on proposed consequences, including roster penalties and a fine equal to 20% of the football budget. It's 20% of the football budget for the receiving school. So even if that's rarely imposed, that kind of proposal changes planning. It becomes contingent liability thinking. The compliance office is no longer just saying, please don't embarrass us. It's saying a mistake here can become a budget event.
That is such a brutal phase, a budget event.
It's brutal because it's real, right? Coaches often think in wins. Lawyers think in exposure. CFOs think in liquidity. The portal window forces all 3 of those clocks to tick at once.
And this is where the fiscal year 2026 modeling gets spicy.
Yes, spicy and cautious. Again, modeled estimates, not final audited results, but in the median scenario, LSU is estimated to slide from a baseline net of plus 3.81 million to around 1.4 million. So 2 million loss, right? Washington goes from minus 5.88 million to roughly negative 17.35 million for the fall semester. Oregon is estimated to go from $270 million surplus to a negative 1.37 million. Ole Miss.
Lee?
Yes.
I do believe you said 270 million. I believe the correct number is 2.7 million.
Yeah. Oh, are you just feel so justified in correcting me?
No. I mean, no. That's 270 down to 1.3.
That is, but it's almost the same numbers as the combine thing where you were like, no, I didn't say it wrong. Yes.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah, I have a clip that I saved. He didn't acknowledge it when I sent it to him. So Oregon goes from a positive 2.7 million to a minus 1.37 million. Thank you, Michael.
You're very welcome.
Ole Miss goes from a negative 5.15 million to a negative 9.51 million, which is almost double. Kansas goes from a negative 4.51 million to it just kills me, to a negative 19.62 million is estimated. And Utah drops from a positive 4.69 million to a positive 1.13 million. So, and smaller programs are also feeling strain, though they have, like I said, different cost structures.
Kansas and Washington, those are the real eye openers here.
Oh, yeah. And those modeled orders of magnitude line up with the public signals of stress, things you're seeing reported from the schools themselves, et cetera, while also warning that reported deficits can mean different things in different reporting contexts. That is an important nuance. So cash budget deficit talk and MFRS style operating results are not identical animals.
That's a subtle point that sports discourse often flattens. People hear deficit and assume one simple bucket.
Yes, and accounting has more traps than an Indiana Jones temple. Timing matters, category treatment matters. Whether certain flows are inside or outside athletics matters. Whether direct athlete pay is booked in one place or another matters.
Now, hit on the worst case scenarios because this is where the viewers will sit up straighter.
Right. And some of this we already went over. So in the worst case modeled portal impact scenario, Washington ends up negative 34.06 million. Kansas ends up negative 36.78 million. Oregon drops to 15.16 million deficit. Ole Miss ends up at 25.2 million negative. And LSU even goes negative in that stress case as about negative 14.52 million. And Utah drops to negative 11.78 million. Again, those are scenario estimates, but that is a lot of money. The point is not the exact decimal. The point is how quickly the downside expands when funding lags and legal compliance issue friction increases.
And that is where the phrase death of college football gets used by the people.
Yes. Now, I think that phrase is melodramatic, but in the wrong way. It's not death, it's repricing, it's restructuring, it's exposure. The old model lets some schools hide the cost of ambition better than others. The new model is making those costs harder to hide.
And the portal window is basically the accelerant because it turns January into the month where everything bad can happen all at once.
Yes. January becomes roster construction month, legal risk month, cash needs month, anti-tampering month, donor pressure month, and public relations month. Ooh. That is not a normal calendar issue. That is a stress test.
So this isn't just a sports calendar tweak. It is a financial architecture problem.
Yep, that's the smartest way to say it. People keep describing the portal as a competitive balance problem, but it's also, and it is that, but it's also a liquidity problem, a governance problem, and a contract management problem.
And when you combine that with weak intermediary oversight, you get the next monster: agent fraud and tampering.
Yes.
This is a segment I really want people to hear carefully because the term agent fraud gets thrown around like a grenade.
Yes, and usually with less precision than a weather forecast written on a napkin. What a visual. So let's separate things. We have real licensed professionals who do competent representation, and they are not the problem. The risk zone is the ecosystem of what I'm calling agent-adjacent actors. Marketers, advisors in quote, handlers, intermediaries, recruiters, opportunists who can operate earlier, more loosely, and with less professional accountability than traditional pro sports agency models. The point is basically that the NIL market widened the lane for shadow intermediaries.
Yes, because now the pitch can happen earlier. The money can flow through more entities. The athlete may be young, underinformed, or undersupported. The deliverables can be fuzzy. The source of money can be obscured, and the NCAA cannot directly license or discipline every person in that chain.
Which creates what I am calling a jurisdictional mismatch. The phrase is beautiful and ugly. Beautiful because it's precise, ugly because it's a real governance nightmare. The actors best positioned to commit deceptive behavior may be the ones least reachable by NCAA punishment. That's why the blog emphasizes federal consumer protection enforcement, SPARTA attention, state AG involvement, and more standardized disclosures.
Let's walk through the specific abuse patterns.
All right, so first, we've got tampering and induced entry, which we've seen a lot of, right? Third parties reach players before portal entry and float promises, monies, roles, soft landing, future opportunity. Then we've got waiver gaming, hardship narratives, medical framing, appeal strategy. All of that can become a litigation and leverage game when eligibility outcomes carry economic value.
Third, rostering arbitrage.
Yep.
The program's over recruit knowing attrition is likely, effectively externalizing the instability on athletes. Yeah. And then fourth, you have phantom deliverables and misrepresentation in NIL deals.
Then fifth, you have identity, tax, and money flow. Just completely forgot how to say that word.
What was that? Opacity?
Opacity, payments moving through collectives, LLCs, marketing firms, whoever, until nobody can see the true source clearly. And then 6 is plain old deceptive intermediary contact.
And this
conduct. Conduct.
Beg your pardon. And this is where some people want the NCAA to just swing a hammer.
Yes, but the NCAA's hammer doesn't hit every nail, and that's the problem, which is why the FTC/Sparta lane matters. If an intermediary is making deceptive representations or failing disclosure obligations, that can look less like a pure sports problem and more like a consumer protection problem.
Which is intellectually satisfying because it moves the frame away from please obey our vague NCAA vibes toward actual enforceable disclosure and deception rules.
Exactly. The more this resembles a market, the more market regulation tools become relevant. You want audit trails. You want minimum contract terms. You want identity verification. You want routing metadata. You want representative disclosure. You want a way to see the money, not just gossip about the money.
And let's say the uncomfortable thing too. Some people shouting loudest about cheating are fine with cheating as long as their school wins.
Yeah, I'm not going to name names, but I'm just going to say somebody that was speaking at the president's conference on this earlier this week, very much shouting the loudest about cheating, and he cheated for a long time. So anyway.
I must have missed that. Now I want to know who you're talking about.
I'm not saying it on here, but I will tell you after. College sports has always had a robust black market morality. Very theatrical, very selective. I object to all the corruption except our corruption, which I consider tradition.
That should also be on a t-shirt.
Yeah.
But seriously, the anti-tampering piece is hard because broad restrictions can trigger their own legal problems.
Yes, which is why I'm leaning towards a narrowly tailored, enforceable set of contract rules and evidence-based remedies rather than broad, vague prohibitions.
There's a lot of legal talk in that sentence.
There's a lot of bar exam talk in that sentence. If you overreach, you invite constitutional, antitrust, restraint of trade, and fairness challenges. So we've got to have legal terms in there, right? If you underreach, the market becomes a whisper network with invoices.
A whisper network with invoices is diabolical.
Yes, but accurate.
And for the fans, here's the simple translation. The problem is not that athletes now have agency. The problem is that the surrounding market infrastructure is immature, under-policed, and full of incentive mismatches.
Again, that was beautifully put.
I agree.
Agency for athletes is not the scandal. Badly regulated intermediation is the scandal. Weekly paper deals are the scandal. Opaque money flow is the scandal. Institutions acting shocked after they've built a system that rewards all of this, that's the comedy.
And once you layer that on top of already fragile athletic budgets, you get the existential question. Yeah. Is this heading towards stabilization, contraction, or a breakaway rule? Here's the dramatic question everybody wants answered. Is college football dying?
My answer is the sport is not dying, but the system-wide model is unstable. That's basically my paper's conclusion too, in cleaner street clothes.
So give me the 3 futures.
All right. So future 1 is stabilization. That means compensation becomes normalized as an actual budget line. And by compensation, I mean paying for players. Behavior shrinks somewhat. Contract systems get more stabilized. Reporting gets better. And transfer windows remain the main roster stability mechanism. In this future, the chaos doesn't disappear, but it becomes more administratable.
That's the everybody hates it less after the paperwork improves future.
Yes, it's the least cinematic and probably the healthiest. It's not romance, it's plumbing. Again, the plumbing wins.
What do you have for future number 2?
That's managed contraction. This is where structurally weaker or subsidy-dependent programs pull back. Maybe they reduce football investment. Maybe they shift divisions. Maybe they cut other sports to fund compensation and rising fixed cost. Maybe institutional leaders start asking harder questions about why campus money should keep plugging the leak.
That one is grim because it means the top of the sport might keep humming while the middle and bottom get squeezed.
Yeah, that is the barbell problem that I talk about in my blog. The top tier has media gravity, donor gravity, and brand gravity, and the rest of the ecosystem doesn't have that same cushion. So,
and feature number 3?
Feature number 3 is fragmentation or breakaway. If legal pressure keeps forcing compensation and mobility outcomes without a unifying federal framework or a collective bargaining architecture, then elite conferences or programs may pursue more autonomous governance. Basically, we're tired of pretending the same rulebook fits everyone.
Which would not surprise me at all. It would just formalize what people have already suspected, that the top of the sport lives on a different planet.
Right? A breakaway would not mean football disappears. It would just mean the top end commercial entity admits it's something closer to a different species.
So when people say the death of college football, they are often lumping together 3 different fears.
Yep.
Loss of tradition, loss of competitive balance, and loss of the old governance illusion.
That's exactly right. Tradition is not identical to structure. Rivalries can survive structural change. Pageantry can survive structural change. Fan intensity can survive it. But what may not survive is the old story that this whole system was held together by amateur principle rather than layered financial engineering and selective restraint.
You know what's funny? The people who most loudly insist the sport is ruined often reveal that what they really miss is not purity, but predictability.
Well, yes.
Go
yes.
Go figure.
Predictability feels like morality when you've been comfortable long enough.
And the weird part is, I get the emotional side. I do. Fans love believing their school was a community and not a capital structure with mascots.
Of course, the emotional side is real. And that's part of what I'm sad about. We're seeing, you and I talked about, Michael, over the college football championships, that there were very few people played for the same school the whole 4 years. You weren't seeing goodbye things at schools to their seniors playing their 4th year. That's gone, right? College football is supposed to be ritual, memory, inheritance, identity. The strangeness of all that can be true, and the underlying system can still be economically unstable. Those facts are not enemies.
So the honest answer is not nihilism. Did I say that right?
Depends. Nihilism, nihilism.
Either way, potato, tomato, potato, tomato, tomato. It's the future. The future depends on whether governance catches up before the middle of the sport gets hollowed out.
And that is the honest answer, which is why this last segment matters the most. What reforms actually make sense, not just politically, but legally and financially?
Right. No whining, no nostalgia monologue, no back in my day fog machine. Lee, what actually helps?
Well, first, there's got to be a standardized NIL contract and disclosure rules tied to real intermediary accountability. I am dead right about this. If money is flowing through a market, then you need minimum terms, identity checks, who pays whom clarity, and auditable metadata. Otherwise, you're building a system on vibes and screenshots.
And vibes and screenshots are not a recognized accounting method.
Not yet. Give Congress time.
Second,
we need a stronger federal baseline for agent and representative conduct aligned with consumer protection enforcement. The translation is, if somebody is doing deceptive sports agent adjacent conduct, there should be enforceable consequences that do not depend on the NCAA pretending it can police every shadow operator.
Which is one reason the FTC and Sparta angle matters so much.
Exactly, because it plugs a jurisdictional hole.
And third,
narrow the anti-tampering rules with real evidence standards. This is just making me crazy. And when we have a little bit of time, I'll be doing a whole, legal watch on all of the coaches tampering with other, so we need anti-tampering rules with real evidence standards, not broad moral panic rules, not narrow contact rules. We need defined remedies. We need conference level procedures, preserve texts, payments, intermediaries, communication chains. If you're going to accuse or punish, build it for discovery, not for press conferences.
I love that sentence. Build it for discovery, not for press conferences.
Yeah, that's half of sports law right there.
Number 4, please.
Okay, so we need two-ledger thinking and liquidity discipline. So schools should think separately about the ordinary operating ledger and the athlete pay roster ledger.
And why is that?
Because the practical problem is not merely we spent money. It is we spent unstable money in a compressed decision window with different sources and risk. If you don't separate those categories in planning, the portal can blow up your operating budget and your audit posture in one shot.
And that ties to the recommendation for a restricted reserve for January.
Yeah. Okay. So a January liquidity reserve is not glamorous, but it is sane. There has to be one. January is now when a lot of the sport's most expensive decisions collide. If you are still budgeting like January is a sleepy administrative month, you are getting mugged by your calendar.
That's an excellent line.
Thank you. I grew up myself.
And 5th?
5th, facilities, debt transparency, and long-term liability discipline. A lot of programs have behaved like tomorrow's donor check will always arrive riding a white horse. Maybe it will, but maybe it'll arrive on a donkey. Maybe it won't arrive at all. Boards and institutions need clearer visibility into debt service, buyouts, and the full non-team overhead picture.
Because this is where the Glamour machine can become a balance sheet horror movie.
Yes, a very shiny horror movie with expensive lighting and an awful ending.
And then there's the uncomfortable one everyone dances around, Title IX.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Well, we don't really want me to go ahead. I have very strong feelings about Title IX, but this is we can't dodge around it. If you normalize direct compensation and budgeting, then Title IX questions, real Title IX questions, like what Title IX was actually started for, do not vanish because they are inconvenient. They get louder. Allocation design, compliance planning, and legal strategy all need to happen up front, not as a panicked retrofit after someone files suit.
So the adult version of reform is not one silver bullet, it's a bundle.
Exactly. It's contract standardization, audit trails, agent disclosure rules, narrow anti-tampering structures, better waiver records, January liquidity management, debt transparency, and Title IX planning. And maybe most importantly, a cultural shift towards admitting that this is an enterprise risk, not just sports drama.
That phrase matters. Enterprise risk.
Yes, because if you keep treating NIL and transfer instability as just sports stuff, then legal, finance, compliance, and governance teams get looped in too late. By the time legal sees it, somebody's already signed the bad paper. By the time compliance sees it, somebody already texted the wrong person. By the time finance sees it, the money has already moved. By the time the president sees it, there's a reporter on line 1.
So here's the distilled lesson.
Yeah.
The schools that survive this best will not be the ones with the loudest slogans. They'll be the ones with the best systems.
Yes, system quality becomes a competitive advantage, not just recruiting charisma, not just donor heat. You're still reverberating. Hold your mic. Wow, Michael. Yes, that's it. System quality becomes competitive advantage, not just recruiting charisma, not just donor heat, but system quality.
And that is such an underrated point for fans. Everybody wants to talk quarterback room. Almost nobody wants to talk contract architecture.
I do. As you may have been able to tell from this episode, I love all this accounting economic stuff. And yet,
I didn't notice.
And yet, contract architecture may decide which quarterback room stays intact.
Lawyers stay winning.
Not always, but we do remain irritatingly relevant.
Okay, final verdict. Is this the death of college football?
No, it is the death of the lazy fairy tale about college football.
It's a strong statement.
Yep, because the sport itself is still culturally powerful. I mean, come on. It is. It's commercially powerful and emotionally powerful. Saturdays still matter. Rivalries still matter. Fans still care. Media money still cares. The top of the sport is not evaporating tomorrow.
I feel a butt coming.
Yes.
There's definitely a butt coming.
Yes, but the old governing fiction that you can preserve amateur-style control over a high-dollar mobility market forever, that has collapsed. And now the bill is on the table.
And that bill includes transfer chaos, legal exposure, direct compensation pressure, donor dependence, institutional subsidy, got a long list here, intermediary risk, and the possibility that some schools simply cannot keep pretending the same way forever.
I'm glad you finally had a long list. I feel like I had all the long lists. So, exactly. And if people want a villain, the villain is not a player asking for value. It is not one quarterback litigating his eligibility. It is not even one agent behaving badly. The villain is a system that evolved economically by refusing for too long to evolve honestly.
Now that is the line.
Yes. And the reason, again, that Trinidad Chambliss matters in this conversation is not because his story is tabloid fuel. It's because his case shows what the new era really is. Eligibility, compensation, and governance now sit close enough together that every waiver, every transfer rule, every contact, every payment path, and every institutional decision is carrying market consequences.
And the reason those school finance tables matter is that they fell apart. They tell it. Oh boy. Begging pardon, people. The reason the school finance tables matter is that they tell us the sport is not equally armored.
Yep. Okay.
Some programs can absorb chaos. Some can barely absorb the weather.
And that's always been the case, by the way. It's just never been so transparent. So this means the real future question is not whether college football exists. It's always going to exist. Yes. It's who can afford the next version of it and under what rules.
And whether those rules are made by the NCAA, by conferences, by courts, by Congress, by the FTC, or by the practical brute force of money.
Yeah. It's probably going to be all of the above, which is why this thing feels so weird. It's a sport, a market, a legal battlefield, a cultural inheritance, and an accounting argument all at once, which makes it fun as well. But this is truly one of America's most unhinged inventions.
And we love it.
Of course we do. That's the problem.
That's the show. And if you made it this far, subscribe because we're going to keep doing this. Sports, law, money, policy, and the strange machinery underneath all of it.
And drop a comment. Is college football stabilizing, contracting, or heading for a breakaway top tier? Because whatever answer you pick, one thing is clear, the old script is gone.
That is correct. For all those watching, we'll see you next time.
You're listening to the AAA Ball and Play podcast. Quick note, this is for education and entertainment. Nothing here is legal, tax, or financial advice, and nothing we say creates an athlete-agent relationship. Listening or contacting us does not make us your lawyers or your agents. For advice, talk to a qualified professional in your state.